Good morning, students. This is our second lecture for chapter 5. In the previous video, you had studied about the different concepts of cost. Today, we'll be learning about the different time periods that are involved in determining the cost. That is, we talk about the short term and the long term. In other words, it is also said as short run and long run periods in economics. A long run is a time period during which a manufacturer or a producer cannot alter the levels of production. More specifically, there are no fixed factors of production in the long run, and there is no enough time for adjustment, so that there are no constraints preventing the change of the output level by changing the capital stock or by entering or leaving an industry. This contrasts with the short run, where some factors are variable and the other factors are fixed. So we can say that in the short term is such a period in which a producer can change certain factors, whereas certain factors remain fixed. Like for example, the plant, the heavy machinery, the building are such things which cannot be changed in a short span of time. Whereas by increasing or decreasing the usage of materials like raw material, the labor, the electricity, if the producer wants, he can increase or decrease the production. Whereas in the long term, we say that all the factors of production are variable. So if the producer wants, he or she can change the plant, the heavy machinery, the building, etc. So if the increase or decrease of the production has to happen on a larger extent, then in the long run these variables can be changed. Further, we move on to the classification of production cost. Now, cost can be classified using different bases or characteristics, including the element, the nature, the time period, the variability, etc. On the basis of time, we can classify them, as you can see, on that is short run and long run production cost. The cost can be further bifurcated on the basis of their variability, that is the short run is further classified into fixed cost and variable cost. Now the fixed cost, if you can see, is further bifurcated into average fixed cost, and from variable cost we can get the average variable cost also. Now let us look into what is meant by fixed cost. Now in the short period where either the production will increase, decrease or remain zero, there is no change in this type of cost, and such cost is called as fixed cost. There is an alternative name that can be used for fixed cost, that is known as overhead cost. So we can say that the fixed cost remains the same regardless of the production output. They do not change with the production levels. For example, the rent of a factory or a building, the house property tax, the interest on capital, these are all examples of fixed cost. Now, if we can more clarification with the help of the data table and the diagrammatic representation, which gives us a more clearer picture for what is meant by fixed cost. Now here, if you can see, there's a schedule that is given, which starts from that if the units produced are 0, it increases to 20, then it goes to 40 and then 50. If you can see, the total fixed cost is fixed irrespective of the units of production. So even if no units are produced, also the rent of the factory or the building will be given. The wages for the employees have to be given. So the total fixed cost remains fixed. This is an hypothetical figure, so you can take your own imaginative figure for explaining total fixed cost. Now let us look into the diagrammatic representation. On the x-axis you have output. On the y-axis the fixed cost is shown. Now if you can see, the numbers for the production units start from 0, it goes up till 50. So on the x-axis you can see that the number has gone up till 60. And the markings you can see of A, B, C, D and E is on the same line, that is on 100, because the total fixed cost remains same. So y-axis shows from 0 to 120, on which we have to mark on 100. Now the output you can see is the total fixed cost is shown by a straight line which is parallel to the x-axis, because The fixed cost does not respond to changes in volume or activity, that is, irrespective of the units produced. The fixed cost curve is the output that we get is a straight line parallel to our x-axis. So we can say that this cost is fixed. This type of cost is therefore known as the total fixed cost, wherever the production unit changes but the cost does not change. And if at all the explanation has to be written, then it can be written that on x-axis the output is shown, on y-axis the fixed cost is shown, and the production ranges from 0 to 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50, but the cost remains the same, that is 100. And so the line that we can see, the straight line that we can see parallel to the x-axis, is known as the TFC, that is the total fixed cost. Moving on further to our next type of cost, that is the variable cost. Now in variable cost, the word itself says, that means it changes. This particular cost has a direct relationship with the units produced. That is, if the units produced, the number increases, then the variable cost will also increase. If the unit cost decreases, then the variable cost will decrease. And if supposing no units are produced, then the variable cost will remain 0. So by comparing fixed cost and variable cost, the difference is that variable cost will remain fixed, so it doesn't have any relation with the number of units produced, whereas variable cost is such a cost which has a direct relationship with the units produced. Fixed cost was known as overhead cost, whereas variable cost is known as direct or main cost. It is also known as unstable cost. It has a positive or a direct relationship with the quantity of production. For example, we can say the raw materials that is used, the transportation, the expenditure on it, the labor wages if per piece wages is to be considered. So these are the different types of costs that are included in the variable cost. Now let us look into the data table that they have given. If you can see over here, the units of output is 0. The total variable cost is 0. If the units of output increases to 20, then you can see the total variable cost increasing to 150. If the units of output increases to 50, the total variable cost increases to 390. So you can see that as and when the units of output increase, the total variable cost will also increase. Now let us look into the diagrammatic representation for the same. Now you can see that the diagrammatic representation starts from 0 because in the data table they have used the output as 0 to show that when the output is 0, the total variable cost is also 0. And then you can see an upward moving trend. Why? Because the variable cost and the number of units produced both have a direct or a positive relationship. So the points A, B, C, D, E, they show that when the output is 10, the variable cost is 80. When the output is 30, the variable cost is 210. And when the when the output is 50, the variable cost is 390. So you can see that in short term the fixed cost is fixed, but the variable cost keeps on changing, and therefore this cost has a direct relationship with the production, and that is why Professor Marshall has said that variable cost as a main cost. So this is how there is the variable cost. These are the two different costs that are involved while producing any particular commodity, that is fixed cost and variable cost. In our next virtual lecture, we will be studying about the total cost, the average fixed cost and the average variable cost. Thank you.